First thing I noticed that morning wasn't the silence, it was the smell. Coffee. Someone had made coffee, and the rich dark scent curled under the bedroom door and reached me before I was fully awake. For exactly 3 seconds, I felt normal. I stretched my arm across the bed, felt the cool, empty space where my husband should have been, and thought, he's up early. How sweet. Then my stomach turned over. Not metaphorically. Literally. A hot wave rolled up from somewhere below my ribs, and I was already swinging my legs off the mattress before I was fully conscious, already moving toward the bathroom in that half-awake sprint that had become my entire existence for the past 6 weeks. I made it. Barely. Afterward, I sat on the cold tile floor with my back against the bathtub and my cheek resting on my own forearm, and I thought, this is what 11 weeks pregnant feels like. This is what I signed up for. This is fine. It was not fine. My name is Hazel. I'm 31 years old. I teach 2nd grade at an elementary school outside of Nashville, Tennessee, which means I spend my days convincing 7-year-olds that the letter Q almost always needs a U, and that sharing is not, in fact, the government's way of taking their things. I have been married to my husband. I will call him Derek throughout this, because that is his name and I no longer have any reason to protect it. For 4 years. We met in grad school. He got his MBA. I got my teaching certificate and, eventually, a morning sickness problem that would reshape everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. Derek's mother, I'll call her what she is, my mother-in-law, lives 40 minutes from us in a suburb south of Nashville called Franklin. She is a woman who irons her dish towels. I say this not as a compliment. I say this as context. His younger sister, who I will call by her real name, Corinne, is 26 and works in marketing and has spent the better part of 4 years deciding quietly and consistently that I am not quite good enough for her brother. She never said it outright. She said it outright. She said it in other ways. The way she addressed birthday cards to Derek and guests for the first 2 years. The way she'd ask at every family dinner how things were going at the school, the way you might ask someone how their hobby was going. Derek thought I was being sensitive. I probably was, but that doesn't mean I was wrong. The day everything came apart started as a Thursday. We were driving back from Derek's mother's house after dinner, a weekly obligation I had never once been excused from. Not for a cold, not for parent-teacher conferences, not for anything. Corinne had been there too, which she often was, because she lived close and because their mother's house was her preferred location for performing the role of favorite child. Dinner had been pot roast. The smell of it had turned my stomach from the moment we walked in. I pushed it around my plate and eaten half a dinner roll and drunk 2 glasses of water and hoped no one noticed. Corinne noticed. "You've barely touched anything," she said across the table with the particular brightness of someone who is pointing something out specifically because they want it pointed out. "I'm not very hungry tonight," I said. "You're never hungry anymore," she said. "You were the same way last week." Derek looked at me. His mother looked at me. I looked at my dinner roll. "I've just had a long week," I said. "We left at 8:30. I fell asleep in the passenger seat somewhere around Brentwood, and when I woke up we were on I-65 and my stomach was trying to exit my body." "Pull over," I said. "What?" "Derek." "Pull over. Now." He pulled over onto the shoulder, and I was out of the car before it fully stopped, and I stood in the grass beside the highway in the dark and lost what little of that dinner roll I'd managed to eat. When I straightened up, eyes watering, knees unsteady, Derek was still in the car. Engine running, hazards on. I stood there for a moment, waiting. He didn't get out. I walked back to the car and opened the passenger door and sat down, and he handed me a fast food napkin from the center console, old, slightly crumpled, and said, "Better?" I said yes. I didn't say, "It would have been nice if you'd come to check on me." I didn't say, "I've been sick every morning for 6 weeks and you haven't once asked if I'm okay." I didn't say any of the things that had been building up in a quiet, patient pile somewhere behind my sternum. I said yes. I folded the napkin. I looked out the window. That should have been the first sign. Looking back, it was one of many I had been carefully, methodically ignoring. The next morning, I woke up at 6 and Derek was already dressed and moving around the bedroom with the specific efficiency of someone who has somewhere to be and does not particularly want to explain where. "You're up early," I said. "Early meeting," he said. He'd been having a lot of early meetings lately. After he left, I lay in bed for a while and did the thing I had gotten very good at, which was talking myself out of the thoughts that kept arriving uninvited. "He's busy. Work is stressful. The merger has been hard on the whole team. You're hormonal and exhausted and reading into things because you're scared." Then I got up, made myself crackers and ginger tea, the only combination that reliably stayed down, and sat at the kitchen table with my phone and saw a text from my best friend, a woman named Audrey who had been my college roommate and who was, by profession, a paralegal at a family law firm in downtown Nashville. The text said, "Call me when Derek's not around, it's about him." I called her immediately. What Audrey told me, carefully, precisely, in the measured tones of someone who works with lawyers and understands the weight of information, was this: a mutual acquaintance had seen Derek at a restaurant in East Nashville 2 weeks ago. Not unusual, except that he had been holding hands across the table with a woman who was not me. And when the mutual acquaintance looked more closely, she had recognized the other woman as Corinne's friend. A woman named Sloane who Corinne had introduced to our family at a Christmas party 2 years ago. I sat at my kitchen table. Outside the window, the neighbor's dog was barking at something in the yard. Somewhere down the street, a garbage truck was making its rounds. The refrigerator hummed. Everything was completely ordinary, and I was sitting in the middle of it with a phone against my ear and a feeling like the floor had just quietly disappeared beneath my feet. "Hazel," Audrey said. "Are you there?" "I'm here," I said. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to tell you over text. I didn't know how to tell you at all, but I also couldn't not tell you." "How long?" I said. My voice sounded remarkably steady. I noted that with a kind of distant curiosity. "I don't know," she said. "That's all I have." After I hung up, I sat there for a long time. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. What I felt instead was something quieter and more terrible, a kind of slow, cold clarity, like when you've been looking at something slightly blurred for so long that you've forgotten it's blurred, and then suddenly it sharpens and you can see exactly what it is. I thought about the early meetings. I thought about the way he'd handed me a napkin from the car while I was sick on the side of the highway. I thought about every dinner at his mother's house where Corinne had watched me with those bright, assessing eyes, and I wondered how long she had known. Whether she had been watching me the way you watch someone who doesn't yet know what's about to happen to them. I thought, I am 11 weeks pregnant and my husband is having an affair and his sister knows. And then I thought, okay, what do I do now? I didn't confront him that night, or the night after. I know that surprises people when I tell them. They expect that I stormed in, threw things, demanded the truth. But I had spent enough time in the classroom to know that the worst thing you can do when you need real information is signal that you're looking for it. 7-year-olds and cheating husbands operate on the same basic principle. The moment they know you're suspicious, they start managing the story. So I acted normal. I made dinner. I asked about his day. I went to sleep next to him in the bed we shared and stared at the ceiling in the dark and mentally started building a list. The list was practical. I was proud of that. I had a separate savings account. Not secret exactly, but one that Derek had never paid much attention to. A holdover from before we were married that I'd continued to deposit a small portion of my paycheck into every month, mostly out of habit. I checked the balance. It was enough. I called Audrey the next afternoon from my car in the parking lot of the grocery store, while Derek thought I was picking up ingredients for lasagna. "I need to know what I'm legally entitled to," I said. "And I need to know how to protect it before I tell him I know." Audrey was quiet for a second. Then she said, "I'm going to give you the number of the best family attorney I know. Her name is Catherine Webb. She's handled cases a lot worse than this, and she will not let anyone take anything from you." I called Catherine Webb the next morning during my prep period, sitting in my classroom with the door closed and the lights off, my second graders at PE down the hall. Catherine Webb was calm and specific and exactly what I needed. She told me what documentation to gather. She told me what I was likely entitled to in the state of Tennessee as a married woman with a child on the way. She told me what not to say, what not to sign, and what not to let happen before we had a plan in place. I spent the next 5 days gathering documents, tax returns, bank statements, the mortgage paperwork, the title on the car, everything Catherine had asked for, copied quietly, uploaded to a shared folder she could access. I made no dramatic moves. I said nothing that would alert Derek, or his mother, or Corinne, especially not Corinne, that I was anything other than the same exhausted, slightly nauseated woman they had all been watching for the past several weeks. On Friday evening, Derek said he had a work thing and wouldn't be home until late. I said okay. I drove to Audrey's apartment, ate soup she made from scratch, cried for approximately 45 minutes, and then drove home and went to bed. On Saturday morning, Catherine Webb told me the paperwork was in order and asked if I was ready. I said yes. I didn't tell Derek on Saturday, though. I told him on Sunday because on Sunday his mother called and invited us for brunch, and Derek said yes on both our behalves, without asking me, and something about that particular moment, the casual assumption of my presence, the reflex of treating me as a permanent fixture in a life he had been quietly planning to leave, made something in me crystallize completely. Brunch at his mother's house. Corinne was there. Of course she was. His mother had made a quiche and a fruit salad and those little frozen pastries she got from Trader Joe's, and we all sat around the dining room table and made normal conversation, and I sat there and looked at Corinne's face and wondered what she saw when she looked at me, whether she felt anything, whether she had tried to talk him out of it, or whether she had been quietly encouraging it in that same steady, unspoken way she had been quietly discouraging me for years. Derek made a joke at some point. His mother laughed. Corinne laughed. I smiled. On the drive home, I waited until we were on the highway, the same highway where, just weeks ago, I had stood on the shoulder in the dark, being sick while he sat in the car with the engine running. And I said, I know about Sloan. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. He didn't deny it. That was the part I had not quite prepared myself for. I had braced for denial, for anger, for the particular performance of outrage that guilty people sometimes use as a defense. Instead, he was very quiet for a long moment, and then he said, How long have you known? Not, it's not what you think. Not, let me explain. Just, how long have you known? Something in my chest that had been holding very tightly for 2 weeks finally let go. Long enough, I said. The next week was the worst of my life, and also, in a strange way, the clearest. Derek moved in with his mother. This was his choice, framed as giving me space, though I understood that what he actually needed was proximity to the support system he had already been using while I didn't know anything was wrong. Corinne was at his mother's house every day. I knew this because our next-door neighbor, a retired school teacher named Bev, who had always liked me and had specifically not liked Corinne. That one smiles too much, she had said once, and I had not forgotten it, kept me informed with the gentle, righteous efficiency of someone who understood exactly what was happening. I went to work every day. I taught the letter Q, I read aloud from Charlotte's Web and did not cry even at the end, which I considered a genuine accomplishment. I ate crackers and ginger tea and, slowly, began to eat slightly more than that. I went to my OB appointments alone, and I looked at the ultrasound images alone, and I held them on my lap on the drive home and talked to them quietly, which I know sounds a little unhinged, but which felt, at the time, like exactly the right thing to do. One night, about 10 days after Derek had left, his mother called me. I want to note that she had not called me once since he moved in. Not to check on me, not to acknowledge that I was pregnant with her grandchild. Not a single word. So when her name appeared on my phone screen, I looked at it for a long moment before I answered, and I made sure my voice was completely even when I did. Hazel, she said, I think we need to have a conversation. She wanted me to understand, she said, that Derek was going through a very difficult time, that these things were complicated, that she hoped we could handle this with maturity, which was a word she used 3 times in 5 minutes in a way that made very clear she thought maturity was something I was at risk of not demonstrating. She said she hoped I wasn't planning to make this ugly. I said, I hope so too. She said that Derek was concerned about the financial arrangements, specifically the house, specifically what I might be planning to do with the information I had, and that was when I understood. Not that she was calling to check on me. Not that she was calling to manage the situation diplomatically. She was calling because she was worried about what I knew and what I was going to do with it. I said, "You don't need to worry about any of that. My attorney is handling everything." The pause that followed was extremely satisfying. "Your attorney," she said. "Catherine Webb," I said. "Downtown Nashville. She's very good." Another pause. "I see," she said. "I hope Derek is doing okay," I said in the warm, steady voice I use when a 7-year-old is about to have a tantrum and I need to redirect the energy in the room. "Please tell him I'll be in touch through Catherine." I hung up. Then I sat down on my kitchen floor and put my forehead on my knees and breathed. Corinne called the next morning. I did not answer. I had been advised not to, and I didn't need a lawyer to tell me that nothing good had ever come from a conversation with Corinne when she wanted something. I let it go to voicemail. She left one 5 minutes long, which is a remarkable amount of time to spend on a voicemail, in which she said, among other things, that I was being strategic in a way that she found disappointing, that she had always known I was this type of person, and that Derek deserved someone who understood that marriage was about sacrifice and partnership. I listened to it twice. Then I forwarded it to Catherine. Catherine's response, sent at 11:15 that night, was, "This is actually very helpful. Thank you. I won't walk through every detail of the next 3 months because some of it is still being finalized and because some of it is genuinely none of anyone's business. What I will say is this. The state of Tennessee protects a spouse's interest in marital property. The house that Derek and I had bought together, with both our names on the mortgage with the down payment that had come in part from my grandmother's inheritance. That house was not going anywhere without my agreement. Catherine made sure I understood my rights clearly and completely, and then she made sure everyone else understood them too. I stayed in the house. This was important to me, not because of the house itself, but because of the school district. My school is 3 miles away. My students know my name. I have a garden in the backyard that I've been building for 2 years and a porch swing that my dad helped me install on a Sunday afternoon last fall, and a nursery I had been quietly planning since the second line appeared on the test. I was not going to leave. Derek's attorney reached out in late November. The terms were not what Derek had hoped for, apparently. Catherine told me this with the calm, specific satisfaction of a professional who is very good at her job. The divorce was filed in December. I was 7 months pregnant. The week before Christmas, I was sitting on my porch in a sweater that no longer quite buttoned at the bottom, drinking decaf and watching the neighbors across the street hang lights too high in their gutters, when Bev appeared at my fence line with a plate of her shortbread cookies. "How are you holding up?" she asked in the direct, no-nonsense way of someone who actually wants to know. "Better than I expected," I said. "Worse than I hoped." She nodded like that was exactly the right answer. "That baby's going to be fine," she said. "You know that, right? Whatever else is a mess, that part is not going to be a mess." I looked down at my hands wrapped around the mug, at the curve of my stomach under the sweater that didn't button. "I know," I said. And I meant it. My daughter was born in February. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. She has my mother's nose, and I have decided, and no one is going to argue with me, my grandmother's eyes. I named her June because she was planned for the summer and arrived in the winter and still managed to bring warmth with her. Because I liked the sound of it. Because it felt like a name that belonged to someone, sturdy and unhurried and entirely her own. The night I brought her home from the hospital, Audrey had driven us, had held my hand through 9 hours of labor, had eaten vending machine sandwiches in the waiting room, and cried in a way that was completely disproportionate to our stated level of emotional investment. I sat in the rocking chair I had assembled myself in the nursery I had painted myself the color of a morning sky, and I held June and I looked around the room, the mobile I'd hung over the crib, the shelf of picture books I'd been quietly buying for months, the small framed print on the wall that said in simple block letters, "You are enough." I had put that up before she was born. Before I knew she was a she, I had put it up for myself. if I'm being honest. I looked at it now. I thought about the night on the highway, the crumpled napkin, the engine running. I thought about the brunch table, and Corinne's bright watching eyes, and the pot roast I couldn't eat. I thought about sitting in my car in the Kroger parking lot building a list, being practical, deciding, quietly and without fanfare, that I was going to be okay. June made a small sound, not a cry, just a sound, like she was checking that I was still there. "I'm here," I said. "I've got you." The house was quiet. The porch swing was outside. The garden was frozen under January ground and would come back in the spring, the way things do. I had the house. I had my school, my students, my classroom with the door that closed. I had June, and I had done all of it, every careful, quiet, deliberate step of it, with exactly one guiding principle: don't react, don't perform, don't give them the version of you they're expecting. Give them the version that walks back through that front door with a plan already in motion and an attorney already on speed dial and not one single thing left to lose. That's the reply that shocked them. Not a scene, not a speech. Just, "My attorney is handling everything." 5 words. Their jaws dropped anyway. People always ask me if I regret not confronting Derek sooner. If I wish I had screamed or thrown something or called Corinne and let her hear exactly what I thought of her. And every time, the honest answer is no. Not because I'm patient by nature. I'm not, ask any of my second graders, but because I've learned, the hard way and the quiet way, that how you respond to being wronged is the only part of the situation that ever truly belongs to you. Derek made his choices. Corinne made hers. Those choices had weight, and that weight went somewhere. It landed on their lives, on their reputations, on the version of themselves they now have to live with. I didn't have to do anything to make that happen. Cause and effect doesn't require your participation. What I had to do was take care of myself. And that, I think, is the thing I most want to pass on. Not as advice, just as something I lived and found to be true. When the worst thing happens, the most radical thing you can do is stay clear-headed. Not cold, not hard, just clear. Know what you have, know what you're owed, know who you can trust, and then move, deliberately, quietly, without announcing yourself. I spent years in that marriage making myself smaller so that Corinne's assessment of me wouldn't matter, editing myself so that Derek's mother would find me acceptable. And I understand now that that particular kind of effort, the effort of shrinking, never once protected me. It just made me easier to overlook. The intelligence I'm most proud of isn't the kind that scored well on tests. It's the kind that knew, in a Kroger parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon, that the most important thing I could do was call a lawyer before I said a single word to my husband. It's the kind that recognized that keeping my savings account, that one quiet holdover from before we were married, was not paranoia. It was wisdom I hadn't yet needed. Your past self sometimes builds you a ladder out of situations your present self hasn't fallen into yet. Audrey used to say that the best revenge is a life well built. She didn't mean luxury. She meant the garden. She meant the porch swing. My dad helped me hang. She meant June, 7 pounds 2 ounces, born in February into a home that no one could take from us. I think about that night on the highway sometimes. The crumpled napkin, the engine running, the specific silence of a person who could have gotten out of the car and didn't. I didn't understand what that silence meant then. I understand it now. It meant that I had already been alone for a long time. I just hadn't admitted it yet. The moment I admitted it, everything became possible. That's what I want people to take from this. Not that betrayal is survivable, though it is. Not that things work out, though they sometimes do. Just this: the clearest, most useful version of yourself shows up when you stop performing for people who were never in your corner to begin with. When you get off the floor of the bathroom and stand up straight and make a list. June is asleep in the next room. The garden will come back in the spring. I made the list. I worked the list. And that was enough.